This is part 3 of our Fantastic Four lore story series. This is The Thing, and this is the story of Marvel Rivals. So The Thing, this is the third member of the Fantastic Four that we are discussing the lore about. And if you don't know about Benjamin J. Grimm, well, I'm going to explain what his story is so far in Marvel Rivals and how it affects the bigger lore and story. So starting off, when Ben Grimm signed up to pilot an experimental spacecraft for his pal Reed Richards, he never imagined he'd return from the flight transformed into a monster. Even though cosmic rays turned him into the Thing, Ben still has a heart of gold beneath his rocky exterior. Since New York City plunged into eternal night, Ben has devoted himself to protecting his home from the monsters plaguing it. So if you've not seen episode 1, where we discussed the Human Torch and his lore and whereabouts he is in the current story of Marvel Rivals, then I'll explain a little bit of that for the background, because we do see the Thing cross over into the Human Torch's lore. So the Human Torch is obviously fighting on the streets, and the Thing, who is patrolling the streets, trying to stop the vampires, protect people, he then sees and he comes and assists him, along with Spider-Man. So it's the Thing, Spider-Man, and Human Torch at that point. So let's move on to this lore, Gangs of Yancey Street, and let's see where this puts us. Ever since New York City became locked in a state of eternal night, the members of the Fantastic Four had been working tirelessly to protect the innocent civilians of Manhattan from the vampires who had overtaken the island. Of course, not every civilian was so innocent, and not all of them wanted to be protected. "Go home, you big lug," a voice shouted from an apartment window. As Ben Grimm, the hero known as the Thing, looked up to see who was shouting at him, he was pelted in the side of the head by a tomato, and then another, each one coming from a different direction. He shouldn't have expected any less, after all, he was on Yancey Street. As the tomato's slimy seeds dripped down Ben's stony face, he let out a huge sigh. This was the street he grew up on. It was the first place he ever felt like he belonged, and yet, instead of celebrating him when he became a big-time superhero, the folks in the old neighborhood treated Ben as if he was a sellout. Still, while the kids in Yancey Street gang might have stocked up on overripe fruit and vegetables to hurl every time Ben paid his home turf a visit, it hadn't deterred the Thing from checking in every day to make sure the people he cared about were safe. "Thanks for the sauce," Ben yelled to his assailants as he wiped off the pulverized produce. "Next time, could you throw some pasta my way? Maybe a nice loaf of bread?" "A guy your size doesn't need that many carbs," another voice yelled back. "Can't blame a guy for trying to get a free bite," Bell replied, forcing a smile. "Depends who they're biting," a third voice yelled. "You see any vamps down there? Tell them the Yancey Street gang ain't no one's dinner." "That's what I'm here to make sure of, you ungrateful punks," Ben mumbled to himself. As he strolled down the street, everything seemed quiet at first. Ben knew far too well from his many years as a hero that it usually meant something bad was about to happen. As usual, his instincts were right on target. As he turned the corner, Ben saw a young boy in the alley next to Kurtzberg's kosher bakery, who had been cornered by a vampire. The boy, about the age of Ben's nephew Franklin, looked terrified, but as soon as he saw the Thing round the corner, he tried to put on a brave front. "I told you, lousy fangers," the boy barked. "No one messes with the Yancey Street gang. We've got friends in high places." "Oh, so now we're friends," Ben quipped, deliberately drawing the vampire's attention away from the boy. "Good thing, because this big lug always takes care of his own." With that, Ben rushed towards the vampire, pulling his gigantic rocky fist back to deliver a crushing blow. The punch managed to knock the monster's fangs clean out of his mouth. The wounded vampire clutched at his jaw in pain before fleeing from the alley. The boy breathed a sigh of relief, then puffed up his chest in a show of bravado. "Coulda handled him myself, you know," he said to the Thing. "Uh-huh," Ben replied. "I'm sure you coulda, and I promise I won't tell your fellow hooligans that I lent a hand, but I need you to do me a favor first." "Fine," the boy replied, "but just this once." "I've been looking for someone," Ben started, "a special friend." "Ain't that sweet," the boy laughed, "but trust me, no gal in her right mind is looking for a fella with your busted mug." Ben just glared at the boy. He quickly realized that this wasn't the time for more jokes and insults. "Sorry, bad habit. The Fantastic Four, we've got a pal who went missing," Ben continued, "and when it comes to what happens on the street in New York, you kids have got a better intel network than Nick Fury." That's because we've got more eyes, the boy said. True, true, Ben said, unable to hide a smirk. So tell me, have any of those eyes seen the Black Panther lurking around somewhere? The guy in the catsuit? The boy replied. Not exactly, but we have heard whispers that some of the vamps around these parts are answering to a new king. And it ain't the old pasty guy living in Central Park Castle neither. So Dracula's got some competition for his throne, the thing asked. That's the rumour at least. And we've got reason to believe it's true. My buddy Stanley went on a supply run into the village yesterday and saw a group of fangers all lined up like there was some sort of army. Real organised and disciplined, not all wild and savage like that freak you just clocked in the kisser. Where'd your buddy see him? Ben asked. Not too far from here, the boy replied. Over in Washington Square Park. Thanks, kid, Ben said, patting the boy on the shoulder with his massive stone hand. You're one of the good ones. Wish I could say the same, the boy said with a wink before running out of the alley towards the safety of his apartment building. Ben couldn't help but chuckle, but he knew things were about to get a whole lot less amusing. When Ben reached Washington Square Park, he was shocked to discover that the young Yancey Street gang member had been telling the truth. There, in the centre of the park, was a group of vampires all practicing fighting moves as if they were running a military training experience, and Ben had seen their combat style countless times before. These were the same ferocious attacks employed in the battle by the Black Panther himself. Normally, if Ben had come across a gathering of vampires this big, he would have rushed into the park with his fists flailing, but this time around he wasn't looking for a fight, he was looking for a friend. So instead, he watched the vampires complete their training exercise and then followed them as they marched back to a seemingly abandoned building. Once the vampires were inside, Ben knew it was time to make his move. He knocked gently on the door. When there was no answer, he shrugged and knocked it right off its hinges with a single punch. The vampires within immediately turned towards the door and raced towards Ben, their fangs bared. Easy fellas, Ben said, pushing his way through the hungry horde. I just came to talk to your boss. No one sees the king, one of the vampires hissed. Tonight, a booming voice said from the shadows, we shall make an exception. The vampires backed away from the thing, clearing a path as a majestic figure stepped into the light. Clad in ornate white armour that had the heads of fearsome beasts carved into each shoulder, as Ben had hoped, he had found himself face to face with his lost ally, the Black Panther. But Ben knew T'Challa well enough that he could instantly see something was wrong. The king's eyes glowed red and his teeth were unusually sharp. Somehow, Ben realized the vampires must have gone to T'Challa and turned him into one of their own. What a revolting development this is, Ben said as he gazed at his old friend. Indeed, T'Challa replied. I'd come here from my intergalactic empire to cure this reality of the plague that has befallen him, and yet I soon found myself to be its next victim. While I was able to survive my initial encounter with the Lord of the Vampires, I had to go into hiding until I was sure I could control the hunger that had overcome me. You should just come to us, Ben said. Susie makes one heck of a brisket. I could not risk putting my closest allies in danger, T'Challa said, and much to my surprise, I was not alone for long. For some reason, I was able to exert my command over the other vampires I encountered. Soon, I had amassed a small army of loyal followers. Once a king, always a king, Ben mused. Must be in the blood. No pun intended. Actually, it seems my blood is no different than any other vampire, T'Challa said. The power once granted to me by the heart-shaped herb has all but faded. I am but a shadow of my former self without it. Too bad, Ben said. That fancy herb of yours ain't exactly something we can get at the local grocer. Does Wakanda make deliveries? I have lost communication with my empire, T'Challa said, reaching into a pouch hidden in his armor, but I did bring one heart-shaped herb with me on this journey. Then what the heck are you waiting for? Ben asked. I'd hoped to give this sample to your teammate Reed Richards in order to synthesize a cure for vampirism, T'Challa said. We can always find a way to get more herbs, Ben replied, but you can't be replaced. I'm sure Stretcher would agree. I suppose you are right, T'Challa said, gazing at the herb in his hand, which gave off a gentle purple glow. T'Challa took a deep breath, put his heart-shaped herb in his mouth, and began to chew on its leaves in mere moments. His eyes began to return to normal, and his fangs began to retract. The curse that had befallen T'Challa was being undone, but the herb had another side effect as well. The vampires around T'Challa all began to sniff at the air wildly, as if searching for the source of something delicious. I feared this would happen, T'Challa said, as his own army suddenly began to turn against them. Dracula suggested that the herb made my blood irresistible to his kind. Then give me some of it, your highness, Ben said, and let me handle the rest. I told you I did not have another herb, T'Challa said, as he leapt up into the rafters of the building. Don't need it, Ben replied. All I want is your blood. Hopefully not as badly as they do, T'Challa mused as he looked down to see the vampires that he once controlled, jumping, reaching towards him in desperation. T'Challa pulled back the armoured sleeve covering his forearm, unsheathing the razor-sharp claws of his opponent's hand, and he did not hesitate as he drew them across his exposed flesh. Blood began to run from the fresh wound, trickling down onto the thing below. Gotta admit, I prefer the tomatoes, Ben said, as the Wakandan's king blood coated his rocky hide. But if it is your blood that these jerks are after, I'll give them what they want. The vampires instantly forgot about T'Challa, who was hiding safely out of reach above them, and turned their frenzied bloodlust on the thing. They frantically tried to sink their teeth into Ben, but failed to puncture his rocky exterior. Sorry kids, Ben said. I may be sweet on the inside, but on the outside I'm just as tough as I look. As the vampires chipped their fangs on the thing's stone hide, T'Challa called down to his ally. These vampires may seem like the enemy, he said, but they were turned to darkness by Dracula, just as I was. They served me loyally and harmed no innocents while under my command, despite their current state. I implore you to show them mercy. Mercy? Ben said, with a tinge of disappointment, but it was almost clobbering time. Instead of attacking the vampires directly, Ben honoured T'Challa's request and hit the ground as hard as he could. The impact sent a powerful shockwave cascading across the floor of the building, knocking all of the vampires temporarily unconscious. Oopsie, Ben said as the entire building began to shake around him. We've got to get out of here, T'Challa. We cannot leave them behind, T'Challa said. You won't have to, a voice said from the doorway. It was Reed Richards, brilliant scientist, fearless adventurer, and Ben's teammate in the Fantastic Four. Fancy seeing you here, Stretcho, Ben said to his best friend, but I ain't complaining. When you didn't return from your patrol, I followed your personal locator beacon here, and I brought something special with me just in case you ran into trouble. Reed extended his arm to show Ben a strange high-tech device. Please tell me that's some sort of anti-vampire ray, Ben said. No, T'Challa said. I recognize that from the designs my sister showed me. It's a miniaturized version of the time stream reintegration device, is it not? Correct, Reed said. And while it only had limited success during its first test run, I've made some adjustments that may prove useful. Less talking, more doing, Ben said, as chunks of debris began to rain down on him and the unconscious vampires. Reed activated the portable TRD, and the entire room began to glow. Suddenly, the building began to reassemble itself, as if the damage to the structure the thing had caused had never occurred. It is as if the device is rewinding time itself, T'Challa said. Well, how about that? Ben added as he watched the Nor. Gotta bring along one of those doohickeys next time I fight the Hulk. I'm afraid the effects were stronger than you intended, T'Challa said, suddenly grimacing pain. My hunger has returned. I have been restored to my vampiric state. Ain't that a kick in the pants, Ben said. But if you're back to being a vampire again, what did the TRD do to your loyal royal subjects? Ben, Reed and T'Challa turned to see what was once a room full of bloodthirsty vampires was now full of ordinary people. They were disorientated and confused, but they were grateful to be human again. You have saved them, T'Challa said. And now it's time to save you, T'Challa, Reed replied. There is no one in this universe or any other that I trust more to do the job, T'Challa said. Ben looked at T'Challa in utter disbelief. After all we've been through, he said. Yeesh, what a guy's got to do to finally get a little respect. So what did we learn from the Thing's lore, the first page of the Thing's lore in Marvel Rivals? We learned that Ben Grimm is still patrolling the streets, and he's going back to Yancey Street where he grew up to try and protect it. But he was also on the lookout for Black Panther, who we found was missing in the last episode of this series, when Shuri contacted Reed Richards to say that T'Challa had, left the intergalactic empire of Wakanda to come to New York, but went missing and lost contact. And we now know that T'Challa was infected to be a vampire, but was able to control it. And from here, he was able to control the vampires around him and his bloodlust. But from here, he took his final heart-shaped herb, which turned him back to normal, not in a non-vampire state. However, the people around him wanted him. But what do we also learn that Reed Richards has created a miniaturized version of the TRD, and we've also seen the way that these buildings, regenerate and go back in time on the Midtown map. We see like the buildings, if you shoot at them enough, they will reverse back into time as if they were never destroyed. So that is kind of what it's referring to. But Ben also hinted at during the story that Franklin Richards, the son of Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, Sue Richards, and Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. But Franklin Richards is one of the most powerful beings in all of Marvel Comics. He's so powerful. And he's just been teased that he is alive in this universe. So will we see Franklin Richards one day? Maybe. We have to wait and see. So we know that Reed Richards, T'Challa, and the Thing are now all together, and they're going to try and get T'Challa back to his normal state. But we also know that Franklin Richards is somewhere alive in this Marvel Rivals universe, one of the most powerful beings in it. So guys, if you did enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment down below on what you thought of this story. And yep, I've been Az, you guys have been awesome. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.